All right. Well, welcome back to all the people who've watched all the previous videos with Ed. We're back with the ultimate clickbait thumbnail that I'm glad that you clicked through. And why do pass-throughs not tell us anything? And we're going to talk to Dr. Ed about that. But just to start off, I need you, the whole audience, if you're watching this video, you need to be able to separate in your head. Pass-throughs are optimal when hunting. But when you're testing, and that's what we're going to talk about today, you actually want to stop the arrow for comparative data. And Ed and I are going to deep dive into that. So Ed and I were talking a little before that. And Ed, I think a good launch spot might be your results from live hunt arrow performance versus testing. And then we'll walk into the testing from there, if that's okay.
Yeah, I kept data across in my last 25 years of hunting. The 627 kills, recovered animals. I had four more animals I didn't recover, but I kept the data, and that's in a separate database from our testing data. And the reason I did that was I wanted to take the same arrow setups I was hunting with, which at any given phase point across those 27 years
Mm-hmm.
was what in the testing was the best performing arrow setup. And I wanted to see what I was getting in hunting compared to testing. When I was using the same bows, because
Mm-hmm.
we did have pass-through shots and poking out the other side shots in our testing database, but they don't tell me anything
Right.
about comparing one arrow setup to another. I got to stop them in the tissue to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have shots that I can look at from testing and compare what I see in an actual hunting situation. And one of the most fascinating things, now I'll admit, 627 animals is not a huge sample,
Mm-hmm. It's
but
pretty
in
big.
every instance where I take average performance on a given arrow setup and compare it to testing on a given arrow setup, the same arrow setup with the same bow, the penetration, average penetration on the hunted animals is actually higher than what I got on the tested animals.
That's amazing because they're still moving and all that stuff. We talk about that all the time. We don't know. So, one of the things Ed has taught me is if you don't know what you say is, I don't know, why don't we test it? So, we're going to speculate a little bit here. Both of you and I have a pretty strong physiology background. What do you think some of the differences are between the higher performance that you saw on animals on the hoof,
Yeah,
live, one shot, whatever, two shots, whatever it took, and then compared
like
to
you said, this
blasting
is
them on
all
the ground.
conjecture because we can't prove it.
Right, that's right. We can't
This
prove
is
it.
speculation. I think there's some factors that contribute to that. I think one on the support bones, the leg bones, shoulder bones. In a live animal, they're under a load.
Mm,
They can be under a stress situation. The
hmm.
animal can be ducking, turning. He's pushing down. He's
Right.
putting force on those bones. And when that single bevel broadhead, which is what I always hunted with because they were the best performers, when it hits that bone, it's much easier to split it than it is a bone that's just laying there with no stress, no load on it. Now, that's my theory on that.
Mm,
In soft tissue, I think that particularly muscle tissue, when you cut living tissue, it retracts very, very rapidly.
Right.
If you've ever had a big laceration, it can pull way apart.
Mm-hmm. Like a
You
mouth.
don't see that happening even on an animal that's immediately tested on after he's down.
Like
I think
the
those
central
are the
nervous
biggest
system.
contributing factors.
The central nervous system is shut down or something. Something like that. It's got to be
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Interesting. Do you think there's anything from the physical mass of the animal pushing on the ground and it's constant? Like because like to your point of the animal, whether he's moving or not, the bones are under a
They
certain
are
load,
pushing.
probably
Yes,
pretty constant. But then you set them on the ground and it's just mush.
yeah.
Probably
I,
bends the
I
ribs
think when you
different.
got him on the ground, you
Mm-hmm.
do have some compression.
Mm-hmm.
You have changed the the angle the ribs are at. You've
Yeah,
done
sure.
a lot of things that are different from that animal that's up. Now, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you do. The bone connections,
Mm-hmm.
do they relax after death?
That's a great question because most people don't realize that your body's firing all the time. When you think you're sitting still, you're not. Your
No,
body's
nervous system's
everything's
always
moving
working.
around and twitching and twirling and keeping you put together, or you just come apart. I have not studied any of the osteopathic stuff enough to know that. However, most people don't realize that ribs
Well, if we've got
themselves
an
have a
orthopedic
connection.
surgeon watching out there, I'd like to hear his
Yeah,
feedback.
right. That would be great if we have a
Down in
cardiothoracic
the
surgeon out
comments,
there.
there are some orthopedic surgeons that bow hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
I've talked to a couple in years past.
Orthopods is what we need. Well, cardiothoracic guys will probably be okay. They better know that too, or they'll cut your chest open and it'll fall apart. I think most people don't realize that just a rib is connected with a hinge at the spine. There's a hinge in the middle, and
Yep.
there's a hinge at the brisket, at the
Mm-hmm.
chest sternum, and then they taper off, and you got the floating ribs in the back. But I don't. I think most people think they're one continuous piece, and they are not, or you wouldn't have short ribs and baby back
Yep.
ribs. Short ribs are where they cut them off in the middle.
Well, they don't pay any attention when they eat ribs.
Yeah, right.
If they did, they would start to realize these things were there. When you hit that
Yeah.
little gristly piece,
So yeah, my point there being when the animal's on the hoof, gravity itself is I think they're gonna be more tapered depending on the animal. Okay, buffaloes are kind of round or whatever, but like we'll just talk about deer, elk, or
even
something.
though they
Maybe
still visibly compress.
right, and then when you put them on the ground, I think they're gonna be more bowed out in a different angle. Well,
Yep.
this could increase skip. I mean, we're totally spitballing here.
Yeah, yeah, this is totally spitballing.
Oh my
But
God,
the more
this
you
is so
curve the
serious.
ribs, the more skip angle you're going to have.
Which is a good thing and a bad thing because you don't know if the results are going to reflect. Well, you just said it. Your live animal penetration was better than the meat on the ground, and 627 is not a small data set.
Well, it's the best we got anywhere in the world. Nobody else has this data.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's the best data available.
So I wanted to stepping on that. I just remind everybody about the foundation and the volunteers and your of course your newsletter. Well, let's poke that in there real quick, and then we'll move
Yeah,
on.
yeah. I always like to get this poked in because you never know somebody new watching.
Yeah, that's right.
The foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. Now, we do not take any funding from the archery industry. Now, that takes away a big money pool from us. This testing is expensive. Uh, we buy everything we test, every arrow shaft, every broadhead, every collar on an arrow, the fletching, everything is there. We buy it across the counter, just like everybody else. Everybody working for the foundation of the board members are all volunteers, non-salary. We depend on bow hunters donating to be able to continue the testing. Now, I can no longer test. Rob's been doing all the testing, and He doesn't have access to the animals I did. I got to hunt all these animals for free. He has to pay to hunt these animals. And if you've been on any Cape Buffalo hunts, you know it ain't cheap.
That's right.
Airfare, the daily cost of a hunt, everything about it is expensive. And Rob pays that out of his pocket. And anybody else from the foundation that goes out and does any testing, any costs like that, they're absorbing. Essentially, this is their overwhelmingly generous donation to the foundation. But we need the average bow hunter out there to step up. If we're going to continue building this data, and I think it's important that we do, and I'll bring this up, the Chris B video and stuff like that, that's falling into the hands of anti-hunters, that's going to come back to be used against bow hunting. It's going to happen. It may not happen here fast, and it may happen here fast. I don't know. But the data that we can build about lethality and wound loss rates, and which I've got mine and Rob's got his, we track these wound loss rates. Uh, it's all going to be useful if we have to fight a heads up battle against people that are trying to shut down bow hunting.
Yeah, they're not gonna just accept an arbitrary anecdotal. They're gonna
No,
want whoever's
it's too emotional.
arbitrating that hearing is gonna want some kind of a data set, something to back up what we're saying, other than we've
Yes.
got a lot of stuff and we just keep doing it and it's fine. It works great.
And I do want to mention they anybody can go to our website. It's ashbybowhunting.org. And that's all one word, Ashby Bowhunting. And it's .org. And they can sign up for the monthly newsletter, which is absolutely free. Comes as an email. Now we call it a monthly newsletter. We try to put it out, but there's 5 of us on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to do everything from the bookkeeping it, forward. Everything that has to be done, the 5 of us have to find time to do. And I can't do much anymore because I've got partial paralysis in my hands, right worse than left. Uh, so I'm pretty much useless to them. So you're basically down to 4 people trying to do everything. And some months we just don't find the time to put out everything, to put together the newsletter. But we try to put it out every month. And like I said, that's absolutely free, whether you donate or don't donate. But we'd love to have the bow hunters donate to us so we can continue building this data. And what we're doing now, this should interest the majority of today's bow hunters, is Rob is going back and looking at things I looked at in the study to see if there's a difference between using the compound bows and the bows that I had to test with towards the end. And we can talk some about that as we go on.
Well, that's on the foundation website. I am not a part of the board, just to let everybody know. But if you go to, and I'll put up some screenshots here of the website, you go to the ashbybowhunting.org website and you go into the Ashby reports, you go to the supplemental reports, and we've got 2 up with an 80-pound compound testing again. And then there's a third one coming out about, so we got 21, 22, and 23 all on buffaloes. And that's the main topic of this conversation. Another thing you can do if I have like a coffee problem. Hunter's Blend Coffee also, if you use code RF or you use code ABF, you'll get 10% off and all that money goes to the foundation. I don't get it. It doesn't come into my pocket. I want the money to go to the foundation so we can keep testing. So enough of the commercials. And
Oh, I do. Add to your commercial. Uh, we have recently added Holtzman Gorilla knives on the
Oh, I didn't know
foundation
about that. Yep.
website,
Okay.
and they give us a 15% rebate on anything you buy from them.
Right.
Not just we just picked a handful of the knives, ones that I find useful for bow hunting on the website. But if you go through our link on the website, anything you buy from Holtzman Gorilla, a portion of that will come back to the foundation.
And that's a good thing. So back to where we started. In a hunting situation, you absolutely want a complete pass through. You do not want the arrow in the animal at all. There are physiologic reasons for that. We may cover that later, but in testing, you want it to stop because pass-throughs don't tell you anything.
Yeah,
So let's unpack that because the first time I heard that, it made my head spin. I was like, wait a second, no, that's the optimal outcome. You just said in a hunting situation, you want to pass through. If we shoot an arrow that passes through, then that's the right arrow. And so give us a description of why you got to catch them or it's zero. It's literally a zero sum game.
yeah. If we're going to compare the performance of one arrow setup to another, the arrow must stop within the animal. If the broadhead breaks the skin on the other side, you have changed penetration medium and you cannot compare. So if you get a pass through, half an arrow sticking out, or just a portion of the broadhead sticking out, it's data that we keep because, like I said, I compare some of this data back to hunting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as comparing the performance of one arrow setup to another in the testing, we must catch the arrow within the animal. Now, I started out using some compounds in the testing, and it only took a couple of years, well, probably 3 years, before I had arrow setups, getting to understand what it took to increase penetration on the arrow setup, that we were sticking arrows out the other side of the animal with compounds.
Was that a surprise? You said it took 3 years. Were you surprised at that?
Yeah, because, well, when we started collecting data, we had no earthly idea
I
why
wanted you to say
what
that.
we were
Yeah,
seeing,
it's
we were
just
seeing.
yeah. It was hold my beer and see what happens, and you had no idea what you were doing. A lot of people,
Absolutely. We looked at all the data from the tall study and we said, well, this worked better than this, but why did it work better than this?
Mhm.
And it took a few years of working on it to start figuring out what it was and then testing it enough to definitively be able to say that was what was making the difference.
So the broadheads are always the big thing. There's 12 factors, and there's FOC and broadheads are the only, and 650 are the three things everybody gets all OCD about.
Yeah,
Um, I know that Rob had in the testing, the original 21 study, a lot of arrow, well, particularly the 12 factor arrow just kept zipping. I mean,
pass
he,
throughs.
he lost them.
Yeah,
Um, and then
both
as
on the
we
hunted
changed the
animal and the
broadhead,
testing.
same arrow, and we changed the broadhead, we started to see the performance differ.
Yeah, just both single valve bevels, just a difference in mechanical advantage. That
Hmm.
was one of the things we were looking at that first year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And taking the same arrow setup and just changing the mechanical advantage of the broadhead made a difference in the outcome penetration. When we dropped from that 3-to-1, genuine 3-to-1 tough head
Hmm.
down to something that was, you know, 2.5 or in that region. The we no longer even broke the skin on the other side, much less got pass-throughs.
Right. So you take a long, skinny broadhead and it was performing at a very high rate. So the pass through did tell us something that it was a higher performer.
Yeah,
But
but to what degree, we don't know. We can't put a degree
okay,
on it.
great. That's a good point. You don't know what degree of
So if
improvement,
you
you just
took
know
an
it's positive.
elephant and used both those arrows, what would the difference be? Who
Hmm.
knows? We may not even stop it at an elephant. I don't know.
So just for everybody listening, because I know this stuff, but y'all may not. In the study, in the 21 study where the mechanical advantage discussion was, it's the same arrow. And then you change the broadhead and they started to slow down. So we're talking about a long, thin, I'll probably throw some pictures up here. Probably
We're talking about the same
I'll throw
weight
some pictures
broadhead
up from the
too.
study on here for people to look at. But you're talking about a long, thin broadhead, like the tough head, which is currently the number one performer versus air broadheads start to get more blunt. That's what mechanical advantage is. More just that's my simple redneck, and they get more become more blunt and they start to slow down more in the tissues, and we start to see the penetration decrease. And that's where you can measure stuff.
Yeah.
One of the nuances of this that I'm just going to say it, it sucks. Anyone who wants to undertake this little journey, you have to write down if it hit a rib or not. You have to write down if it didn't hit a rib because that is not the same hit. You can't say I hit the broadside of the Cape Buffalo and got 14 inches of penetration with broadhead X, which you like, and then you get a broadhead Y and it hit a rib dead center and it performs 2 inches shorter. You say, see, that thing's a piece of garbage. You can't do that and be intellectually honest because those are two different shots. So you can't just say we're shooting the whole thoracic wall of the Cape Buffalo and negate all the ribs and the angles and the little spaces in between. You have to dig. That's it's annoying. Just the small amount of stuff I've done with pigs, you got to get out your knife and get bloody to find out what happened. You can't
Oh
just
yeah.
go, well, that's 14
You may have
inches.
to look at the bone to see if there was a bone skin. You
Hmm.
can't do it without digging that bone out and cleaning it up.
We had was it then that we were shooting the broadheads with the 40-degree bevel and we were having a big old tail whip on them?
That year, the 2022, one or the other. Uh, yeah, and that was, when you're talking about these errors that we tested and just changed the broadhead, we're talking about broadheads the same weight,
Right,
just a different profile.
right, right.
And yes, when we got to fairly wide ones that also had a steeper single bevel on them,
Right.
we got consistent skips off the ribs that we did not get with any of the other single bevels. Now, was it the width? They're thicker blades too. Were they thicker? Was it the steeper bevel? We got to do more testing to find
Yeah,
out.
right. We don't know that answer. We just know what
We
we're
don't
getting.
have an answer for that yet.
I think that came out of some folks ran over to that we knew or they called us and said, "Hey, I shot a Cape Buffalo with this wider broadhead with this 40-degree bevel, and something happened, and I
Yeah,
can't explain it." And so we decided to throw that into the testing.
yeah. And when Rob had exactly the same thing happen on 3 consecutive shots
Hmm.
that they had reported from this hunted Cape Buffalo.
Right.
And that's where we get a lot of ideas for testing too, is people come forward and tell us stuff.
Well, that's a reason to sign up. You can just report in if you have something wonky happen or something, and it may give us an idea of what to test. The that particular outcome. So just for everybody, because everybody in this world these days just loves to decide they have an absolute. That it does not mean that 100% of the time a broadhead that's wide with a 40-degree bevel will wiggle or do something crazy. That
That's
does
right.
not mean that. It means We got some reports, live hunts. We got some other people who smashed them with it, and it was fine. And then we had a couple of three people who were, and I think they were pretty experienced. This wasn't some kind of rookies. And they said that thing hit and it was weird. Like it went sideways. What the hell is that? So we decided to test it. So no absolutes, please. We're just telling you the things that come up and then we try to repeat it. It's a pain in the butt, by the way. How many? You need 10K buffalo on the ground, not two. I mean, you really do. You need 20 of them.
Well, that's the advantage I had. They were free.
Right. You just keep,
It means I could autopsy, necropsy, whatever you want to call it. But I could only do like one buffalo every 3 days at the best.
yeah, it's a huge amount of work. Um, I'm gonna stay on the bevel thing. You shot the extreme and the really narrow stuff, and you ground them down to 25. Were you testing something with that? Was it a
Oh
theory?
yeah, I tested different bevels, and with the particular broadhead, which was the original grizzly,
Hmm.
uh, and the steel that's in that particular broadhead, 25 degrees was as thin, as long a bevel, and as thin a bevel as I could get, and not have problems with the edge rolling.
Okay,
If
right.
I tried to go thinner than that, I got rolled edges.
And that's a structural integrity failure right there because
It no longer cuts.
it no longer cuts.
Like my thumb. If you got something that's sharp,
Yeah, right.
I, I have a little trouble handling my cook knives with this paralysis of my hands. The knife didn't go where I intended it to.
Absolutely. That's no fun. I've got a couple of dings on me for messing with broadheads. I stuck one almost completely through the palm of my hand one time. It was glorious. So that's an interesting data point there because we're trying to um, when we built the head that I had Sirius build me, I made sure I wanted it under 30, and we're going to keep pressing the edge of that bevel.
Well,
But
we're still testing because people keep coming out with these new steels, and broadhead manufacturers are changing steels they've used. And so every time they do that, we got to start all over again.
yeah, right, right. The So most people don't grasp the concept. I think what's going on, there's a couple of new broadheads out. I've had a couple of texts about where people are making the blades curved and the tips got a curve, and we got to test that. Um, the theory that things rotating faster is a good thing. It's not a bullet, but describe the leverage from the plane of the width of the bevel.
The, the amount of torque that it's going to generate, particularly going through a hard tissue like bone,
Hmm.
is dependent on the surface area of the bevels that are actually in contact at any given time. So if the broadhead is going through the bone and part of it sticking out on both sides,
Right.
that surface area of just the bevel that's in contact is going to dictate the amount of torque you have.
The actual surface area of for people to grasp this, because I understand this, the sharpened area of the broadhead is the surface area.
Yes,
So in the example of the 40-degree bevel, which is super steep, you have no surface area. It's a little short travel because if the blades were that thick, it'd be a huge surface area,
yeah.
but they're not, right? So what you're talking about is instead of here, and you have a little tiny surface area, when you tilt that down, all of a sudden you have surface area that
It
opens up
gets
like that. And I've had this question a lot. you're putting a 10-foot cheater bar on a pipe, I mean, on a bolt with a wrench and going like this, or you're putting a 1 foot long cheater bar on and trying to heave ho like hell.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with the actual surface area of the sharpened part of the broadhead. That's the whole bevel. I did a video on this, but it's been a while. That's the torque. And you want slow, high leverage like a 10-foot cheater bar.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's good
So
stuff.
that's why I wanted to go. One of the reasons I wanted to go to the thinnest edge that would not roll was that it gave me more surface area
Mm-hmm.
to give me more rotational torque.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted that thin edge because, you know, like in the clotting cascade, it gives us an advantage in the wound channel.
Much thinner cuts
In
and
the
everything.
yes,
That's
so
that's
you're
that's
getting
pure
a
physiology.
double plus out
Yeah.
of that low bevel angle, as long as the steel will stand up to it.
We had the tough head 300 grain. Nobody wants to shoot a 300 grain broadheads. That's why we don't have them anymore. Scares the hell out of people. When I hand out my hunting arrows that are JB welded together with a tough head on that weigh 700 grains that talks, people just look at it and they just can't even fathom shooting that broadhead. God, they fly good. Um, that 300 grain tough head with the 20-degree bevel did well, if I remember, on the Cape
Hmm?
Buffalo testing. And that is a
Yes.
really thin edge. Good gosh, those things got sharp. Jeremy got the rest. Your buddy Jeremy got all of mine.
Mm.
He likes to shoot 300 grain broadheads and dump elk and shoulder shoot them and blast them down. And so I had 3 or 4 of them left when I saw him last. I was like, all right, man, here's a gift to you, buddy. All right. So in closing, because we have about 5 minutes left, when we're testing, they got to stop because you can't get a comparative analysis. Man, I always learn something listening to you. The pass through, we don't know how efficient that pass through is. It could go through an elephant or 2 elephants or only barely fall out the other side of a Cape buffalo, and we don't know what that is.
That's right.
That's awesome. I got to get over there with Rob and shoot the Cape buffaloes with him and do the testing. That would be super fun.
Well, we'd love to have you go along with him.
The Rhonda shot 26 inches and 43 pounds, and I think she had 4 or 5 arrows hit the opposite thoracic wall on a test buffalo,
Yeah.
and she was only shooting like 575, but I think she was at 32 or 33%. That's a unicorn
Yes.
arrow.
Yeah. Yeah. She was, it may have been higher than that. It may have been 33, 34%. Those short arrows, you can get a lot of FOC with a heavy broadhead on there
Right.
and steel inserts and, trying to get them as bomb proof as possible, which we're going to be doing more testing on. That's coming up very shortly.
Oh yeah, no, I'm dying to
We're
test.
looking
So,
at how bomb proof can we make the arrow. And I've got a lot
spoiler
of data from when I did it, so we've got stuff to compare to.
spoiler alert, I am actually testing sleeve systems and all these jacked up systems that supposedly look like they're more durable than a regular old insert that goes inside the arrow. And we're going to test some more of that. I have a theory because I'm seeing some weird bending, and I don't know if it's repeated shots and then it hits something moderately hard, like the edge of something, and then it's finally weak and bends, which is bad for hunting, or if we've engineered a structural integrity possibility, like a percentage of these arrows, the outsert systems might bend. Not 100%. We know they work. Lots of crazy data, lots of big animals being whacked with them. But I'm testing some arrows right now that are standard diameter with the old school inserts in them. And my theory is you have carbon, you have the insert in it, it's flush with the top of the arrow, and then the broadhead screws inside. It's like 3 layers of flexibility. that may or may not be more durable. We're going to shoot what, some kind of armor you have?
Well, I have the same piece of armor plate, which happens to be made into a cook grate. It's the hatch cover off an armored personnel carrier.
Nice.
That's the exact same piece that I tested against.
I'm dying for that. It's going to be super fun to break a bunch of crap.
Yeah, well, it is. It's expensive, but you learn a lot.
Yeah, you do learn a lot. All right, Ed, this has been great. Um, I don't think I have any more questions for you. We have 1 minute left. So what I'm going to say is please comment below. Me and Ed are keeping a list of questions that come up a lot through all these videos, and we're going to continue to answer them in this format and, get the answer from the horse's mouth. So it's so to speak from Dr. Ed. And then ponder all the stuff and make it very clear that we're curious and we want to learn. And it's also, unfortunately for us, Ed, it's adding to the list of crap you want us to do.
Yes. We have any time left?
No,
Oh, I
that
was going
stinks.
to explain to people why I'm not answering their comments.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll cover that afterward.
Okay.
Hang on.
Yep. Between my hands not typing and for whatever reason my posts keep disappearing, I just can't keep it up.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. All right. I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you,
Have a good
sir.
day. Bye.
Bye bye.